Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're jumping into a stack of listener-provided sources that honestly paint a pretty chilling picture of what's happening in Iran right now.
Yeah, they really do. And these materials link to events that might seem separate at first, but are deeply connected.
On one hand, you have the violent disruption of a memorial service in Mashhad. And on the other, this just staggering acceleration of state executions happening across the country.
Right. And our core mission here for you is to really move past just the noise of the headlines.
To get underneath it.
Exactly. We want to analyze the strategy behind these actions, how the Iranian regime is using this very targeted, engineered division and, well, public spectacle to create what's really a smokescreen.
To divert attention from a campaign of massive, organized human rights abuses. So, okay, let's unpack this. Where do we start?
I think we have to start with the flashpoint, the memorial for Khosrow Ali Kurdi in Mashhad. He was clearly a high-value target for the regime.
The sources describe him as a prominent lawyer, a human rights activist, and just vehemently anti-regime.
And he'd been at this for years. Defending political prisoners, he even served time himself for his work.
And what immediately makes his case so concerning is the mystery around his death. The state just swiftly labeled it sudden heart attack.
Which, as the sources point out, connects directly to what they call Moscow's methods for eliminating opponents.
Right. When a figure like this dies so suddenly, skepticism is, it's the default reaction among activists, and for good reason.
And then the regime immediately starts muddying the waters around his political identity.
Yeah, some elements tried to push this narrative that he was a royalist, but the sources we reviewed show very clear counterstatements.
Specifically from the freedom movement of Iran, the Nezat Azadi in Mashhad, who basically said, no, he was one of ours, and they explicitly rejected any royalist leanings.
So you have confusion around his death, confusion around his politics, and then come the signs of an actual cover-up.
And they were not subtle about it. We know they seized all the security camera footage from around his office. Days later, they released this tiny, heavily edited video clip.
And the family is demanding the raw footage, right?
Yeah.
They want a full autopsy, a forensic report.
Of course. But none of that was ever provided. Nothing. Which pressured them into an immediate burial.
That sequence, seizing the evidence, denying the reports, rushing the burial, that's what creates the foundation of doubt that fuels these protests.
Absolutely. So when his 7th-day memorial happens, the violence that erupts, the arrests, it wasn't just the regime's old playbook. The analysis we have suggests they deployed something new, a new tactical layer.
Okay, let's dive into that new tactic.
Right.
The sources observe that the regime is now actively planting agents inside these opposition gatherings.
Yes, to introduce what they call deviant slogans.
And the analysis says they're using a strategy inside Iran that they historically only used abroad. It's called the 8.20 and 91 politics. What exactly is that?
So that phrase refers to a strategy where, groups backed by intelligence services infiltrate opposition movements. They seem legitimate at first. They'll even chant some anti-regime slogans.
To blend in.
To blend in, exactly. But then they pivot quickly to something that fractures the opposition from within.
The goal isn't to stop the protest, but to poison it. To make sure the opposition, the Barandaja, the freedom fighters, are fighting each other instead of the regime.
And the Mashhad incident is a perfect case study. These agents started inserting slogans that favored royalists, specifically Reza Pahlavi or his father. Things like, Reza Shah, may your soul be happy.
The intelligence ministry's goal, according to the sources, was just to create a visible crack, to sow confusion among people who are genuinely there for democracy.
But here's where we get the smoking gun, as the source puts it.
Right.
It's in how the real activists reacted.
Over their response.
They saw what was happening. They started using these unifying core slogans, we stand until the end, which explicitly rejects both the monarchy and the theocracy.
And how did the agents react to that?
They immediately dropped the act. It became aggressive. They started throwing stones, physically attacking the speakers. They were the ones who initiated the chaos that led to all the arrests.
So the intelligence ministry, the Wizard Etela'at, had this very specific engineered plan. But what's interesting is the source's conclusion that the opposition's awareness is high enough now to resist it. They saw the game.
Which brings us to the bigger strategic question you should be asking yourself. Why? Why would the regime put so much effort into promoting Reza Pahlavi, a figure who's supposedly trying to overthrow them?
Well, the analysis in these documents suggests it's because he lacks genuine, verifiable mass support inside the country. And that makes him the perfect controlled opponent.
The data points are, frankly, pretty shocking. The source lists multiple failed attempts to rally support. They mention the incredibly low turnout for events like Immortal Guard Day.
And even major internationally promoted rallies. You're talking about cities like Washington, D.C. and Toronto with huge Iranian diaspora populations.
And yet, the sources estimate that the Washington rally, for example, maybe drew 500 to 600 people. After months of promotion, that's a huge failure to mobilize.
Which connects to this broader historical argument the source makes.
Yeah, that for over 120 years, going all the way back to the Constitutional Revolution, the hands of the Shah and the Sheikh are in the same pot.
Meaning both forces have, at times, been backed by outside powers and worked against real independence.
Exactly. The people are aware of this cycle. They see a return to monarchy as just more of the same, not as genuine opposition.
So the regime's endgame isn't a Pahlavi victory, it's control over their own replacement. If the supreme leader, Khamenei, dies, they'd much rather have a figurehead change, a guy in a tie, as the source puts it, than a real democratic movement that tears down the whole structure.
It's terrifyingly cynical. The source even claims a specific dossier or a plan for a Pahlavi return was drawn up.
And what was in it?
It included establishing a dictatorship for an initial 10 years based on this incredibly condescending idea that the Iranian people do not understand democracy yet.
And crucially, this alleged plan would keep the key security organs in place. We're talking about organizations like the Shah's old security service, SAVAK, and the IRGC, the SIPA.
You just swap out the faces at the very top. It's a revolving door, not a revolution.
The sources go on to describe Pahlavi as a mercenary and an opportunist, citing controversial statements he's made and promises to open Iran to what they call foreign plunder.
So this whole Mashhad spectacle, this engineered fight over which flavor of authoritarianism is worse, it's all designed to consume the opposition's energy, but what is it hiding?
And that's where we have to shift focus. Because the grim reality this is all meant to obscure is this unprecedented crisis of state executions in Iran.
The statistics are just horrifying. We're talking about a chilling, staggering rate. One execution every 90 minutes.
Just let that sink in for a moment. One every 90 minutes.
Yeah.
That has to be transforming state violence into a tool of domestic terror.
And to understand just how fast it's accelerated, the source provides a comparison. Under a so-called reformist president, the rate was about one execution every 5.5 days.
That massive leap proves it doesn't matter who the president is, principlist or reformist. The final, lethal decisions come from the supreme leader. The core repressive machine doesn't change.
And this raises a really profound question about those who could speak out but don't. The source analysis is very critical of influential Iranian elites.
World-famous filmmakers, musicians winning Grammys, even Nobel laureates like Shirin Nariman.
The criticism focuses on what the source calls a self-centered culture, that these prominent figures prioritize their own status over sacrificing for the cause, even with these huge global platforms.
They're celebrated for being Iranian, but they aren't forcefully advocating for those facing execution in Iran.
And this silence is especially deafening when you get to the regime's biggest political red line, which is probably the most sensitive issue in the entire opposition movement.
Defending political prisoners tied to the Mojahedin, the MEK, or PMOI.
Exactly. And the source is asking, why do some activists respect the regime's red line? Why do they refuse to defend MEK-affiliated prisoners like Javad Vafaisani or Ehsan Faridi when they're facing execution?
The argument here is that real democracy requires defending all Iranians,
Right.
regardless of their political group.
Yes. To draw a line and say, I'll defend this prisoner, but not that one because of their affiliation, well, that's falling right into the regime's trap. It's playing their game of divide and conquer.
The source is insistent that the MEK and the National Council of Resistance aren't just a footnote. They're an active, essential part of the historical opposition.
And the group the regime fears the most, having fought them for 45 years.
And that fear is backed up by their actions. The sources detail how the MEK is essentially the only organized opposition group consistently running these high-level global advocacy campaigns.
Week in, week out. In the U.S. Congress, the European Parliament, the UN, it's a sustained pressure campaign that no one else is mounting at that scale.
But there are signs of hope, of the kind of unity that's needed coming from inside the prisons themselves.
Yes, the movement called Tuesdays Against Executions. It's powerful. You have common prisoners and political prisoners from all different beliefs conducting hunger strikes together.
That solidarity, that refusal to let politics override basic humanity, is what the source says is the key ingredient for change.
So if we circle back and connect all the dots, the Mashhad incident with its manufactured royalist conflict is a deliberate diversion.
It's a smokescreen designed to distract the world from this horrific, systematic campaign of state terror where life is extinguished every 90 minutes.
And this repression is enabled fundamentally by international appeasement. The sources use a specific term, mamashant.
And they allege this policy is driven by powerful lobbying interests, naming groups like Paya and individuals like Trita Parsi. Huge amounts of money are supposedly involved.
And part of that strategy involves actively demonizing independent opposition groups, like the MEK, to maintain the status quo.
So what's the counter strategy? What should the diaspora be pushing for?
The source proposes a really powerful diplomatic strategy, and it draws a parallel to the campaign against South African apartheid.
No.
The argument is that the diaspora must demand that Western governments close Iranian embassies and expel diplomats for every single execution. That kind of continuous high-level diplomatic pressure is what they believe will force a change.
Just imagine the shift. If those famous figures we talked about, Jafar Panahi meeting Scorsese, Nardis Mohammadi speaking to Angelina Jolie, use that access to speak out against all executions.
If they refuse to respect the regime's internal red lines, it would create an undeniable moral force that would be impossible for governments to just look away from.
So, to sum this all up for you, the Iranian regime is manufacturing internal conflict as a smokescreen while it accelerates executions to an unthinkable rate. And true freedom, according to these sources, depends on the unified defense of all prisoners, transcending the very divisions the regime works so hard to create.
And if we just lift our eyes for a moment from the crisis to the future, the sources offer a really powerful provocative vision.
What's that?
They insist that once this current system of monopoly and colonialism is gone, Iran has the capacity to become the Japan or Singapore of the future, a prosperous, stabilizing force in the Middle East.
That potential future, achieved through sacrifice, is why this fight for independence is so critical right now.
It's a vision of an Iran so strong and independent that the outside world, these same appeasing governments, will eventually have to come back and beg for relations based on mutual respect.
Not compromise. A powerful thought to end on.
It is. The ultimate goal is respect through strength and independence.
Thank you for taking this deep dive into your source material with us. We hope this analysis leaves you not just better informed, but better equipped to think about these incredibly complex issues.